This sounds like a joke. It is not. A 4,000-year-old embalming ritual helped build the road that leads to one of the most subscribed platforms on the internet today. Not directly, not on purpose, through a chain of dominoes so strange that historians still argue over some of the pieces. Stay with this one, it gets stranger the deeper you go. Your trigger event starts around 2600 BCE in the workshops of ancient Egypt. Priests and embalmers developed a process to preserve the dead for the afterlife. Natron salt to dry the body. Linen to wrap it, sometimes hundreds of yards of it wound with careful precision. Resin and bitumen to seal it against time itself. The goal was eternity, a body meant to last forever, so the soul had somewhere to return. Nobody involved was thinking about anything that would happen 3,000 years later. Why would they? They were solving a spiritual problem, not writing a script for the future. But preserved bodies do not stay buried forever. Fast forward to the medieval and early modern periods. European apothecaries developed a strange appetite for something called mumia, a black resinous substance believed to come from embalmed Egyptian corpses, ground into powder, mixed into tinctures, sold as medicine, prescribed for bruises, seizures, internal bleeding, even the plague. This was not a fringe practice. It was mainstream medicine for centuries. The historian Richard Sugg documented this trade extensively in his research on medicinal cannibalism, showing that mummy powder was a normal item on pharmacy shelves in London and Paris for hundreds of years. Kings took it, poets wrote about it, ordinary sick people, desperate for a cure, swallowed pieces of the ancient dead without a second thought. Here's the first domino: a funeral practice built for eternity turned into a commodity. And once something becomes a commodity, someone always finds a way to sell more of it. By the 1700s, the mumia medicine trade began fading as science advanced, and doctors grew skeptical of ground-up corpses as a cure for anything. But the appetite for Egypt itself did not fade. It grew. Then came the second domino, and it has a very specific date: 1798. Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, and unlike most military campaigns, he brought along more than 150 scholars, artists, engineers, and scientists to study everything they found. Their work was eventually published as the massive, multi-volume Description de l'Egypte, and it set off a continent-wide obsession that historians now call Egyptomania. Suddenly Egypt was fashionable. Egyptian columns showed up on European buildings. Egyptian motifs decorated furniture, jewelry, wallpaper, even fashion. And wealthy European tourists started bringing home actual Egyptian mummies as souvenirs, the way people today bring home a snow globe or a magnet from an airport gift shop. Ask yourself something. What happens when thousands of wealthy Europeans suddenly want a piece of ancient Egypt sitting in their own parlor? They get one. Mummies were shipped to England and France by the boatload throughout the 1800s, sold at auction houses, displayed in private collections, and eventually turned into a form of public entertainment. This is the third domino, and it is one of the strangest chapters in the whole chain. Victorian surgeon Thomas Pettigrew became famous, even notorious, for hosting public mummy unwrapping parties in packed London lecture halls. Tickets sold out weeks in advance. Audiences in their finest clothes crowded in to watch a 3,000-year-old body slowly stripped of its linen wrappings, layer by layer in front of a paying crowd, sometimes with a live orchestra setting the mood. Egyptologist Bob Breyer, who has spent decades studying mummification and its cultural afterlife, has written extensively about these events, noting that they blended real scientific curiosity with pure theatrical spectacle. It was framed as archaeology. It functioned as a show. Notice what just happened. Death, preservation, and the unwrapped human body had become a paid public performance, staged for an audience hungry to see something forbidden made visible. That idea did not disappear once the Victorian mummy craze faded. It evolved into something else. Egyptomania kept climbing through the 1800s, and it fed directly into a broader cultural trend across Europe and America called Orientalism, a sweeping fascination with an imagined, exoticized version of the East expressed through art, fashion, literature, and increasingly, live entertainment. Middle Eastern and North African imagery became a cultural shortcut for danger, mystery, and sensuality on Western stages. Painters depicted imagined harems. Novelists wrote a veiled mystery. This is the fourth domino, and it quietly set the stage, quite literally, for what came next. In 1893, Chicago hosted the World's Columbian Exposition, a massive World's Fair meant to showcase progress, industry, and culture to more than 27 million visitors. Along the entertainment midway, a dancer performing under the stage name Little Egypt became the sensation of the entire fair. Her performance, marketed as an authentic exotic dance from the Orient, drew enormous crowds and even bigger controversy. Newspapers across the country debated whether it was legitimate cultural exhibition or outright indecency. Preachers denounced it from pulpits. Curious fairgoers lined up anyway. The historian Donna Carlton, who spent years untangling the myths and misattributions around this event in her book Looking for Little Egypt, found that the character was partly manufactured, a blend of real North African dance traditions filtered through decades of European Egyptomania and pure American showmanship. Here's the fifth domino, and it is a big one. Little Egypt's fame at the fair is widely credited by entertainment historians as a launching point for what became known as American burlesque, and eventually striptease as commercial mainstream entertainment. A single mummification tradition from millennia earlier had traveled through medicine, through spectacle, through Orientalist fascination, and landed, of all places, on a fairground stage in Illinois, quietly reshaping American nightlife entertainment for the century that followed. Does that feel like a stretch? Maybe. But history rarely moves in straight lines. It moves through culture, through fashion, through whatever audiences are primed, gradually to find thrilling. And by the early 1900s, burlesque theaters were a fixture in American cities from New York to San Francisco, built on exactly the blend of exoticism and spectacle that Egyptomania had helped popularize decades earlier, layer by layer, without anyone planning the whole arc from the start. That brings the sixth domino. Burlesque did not stay in smoky, curtained theaters forever. Across the 20th century, it fed into a much larger, more organized, and far more profitable adult entertainment industry. In 1953, Hugh Hefner launched Playboy magazine, taking the same core idea, sensuality packaged as mainstream entertainment, and delivering it through mass media into millions of American households. Hefner's business model proved something important, something advertisers and media executives had underestimated. Audiences were willing to pay directly, month after month, for access to curated, intimate content delivered on a schedule. That is a concept tracing its cultural roots straight back through burlesque, through Orientalist stage spectacle, through Victorian mummy theater, and all the way back to that original obsession with the preserved Egyptian body. There's a quieter thread running alongside this whole story too, one worth pausing on. Egyptomania did not just create burlesque, it also fed a booming trade in fake antiquities, forged papyrus and manufactured relics sold to tourists who could not tell the difference between something genuinely ancient and something painted the week before. Economic historians studying 19th century Cairo have pointed to entire local industries built around satisfying European demand for authentic Egypt, whether or not the object in question had ever seen a pharaoh. That same dynamic, manufacturing the appearance of authenticity to satisfy an audience's fantasy, would echo forward too. Little Egypt's own act was billed as authentic Middle Eastern tradition. It was, in reality, a constructed performance shaped for an American crowd that wanted a specific kind of exotic thrill. The product being sold was never quite the real thing. It was a carefully packaged idea of the real thing. Sound familiar? Now for the seventh domino, and it is the one that finally brings this into your world. Today, on the device in your hand. For decades, the adult entertainment industry ran through publishers, studios, and physical distribution. Magazines on newsstands, video stores on street corners, pay-per-view cable channels. Then the internet quietly rebuilt the entire model from the ground up. Creators no longer needed a studio or a publisher standing between them and their audience. They needed a platform, and almost nothing else. In 2016, a British entrepreneur named Timothy Stockley launched a subscription platform originally designed for any kind of paid content at all, from fitness coaches to musicians to chefs. It was called OnlyFans. Within a few years, it became overwhelmingly associated with adult content creators, selling direct access to their audience, cutting out the studios, the magazines, and the theaters entirely, and keeping the majority of the revenue for themselves. The core transaction, though, is centuries old, even if the interface is new. Pay directly for access to a body, packaged for viewing, priced for demand. So look at the full chain one more time, start to finish. Ancient Egyptian embalmers preserved bodies for eternity. Renaissance and early modern apothecaries turned those preserved bodies into medicine. Napoleon scholars turned all of Egypt into a European obsession. Victorian showmen turned mummies into ticketed public spectacle. Orientalist fantasy turned that spectacle into exoticized stage entertainment. A dancer at a Chicago fair turned that entertainment into American burlesque. Hugh Hefner turned burlesque into a mass media subscription business, and the internet turned that subscription business into a platform, sitting quietly on a phone in your pocket right now. None of these people set out to create the others. Not the priest wrapping linen in the desert heat, focused only on the next life. Not Pettigrew unwrapping mummies in a packed London hall, focused on ticket sales and scientific reputation. Not the dancer, trying to survive a controversial, exhausting gig at a fair in 1893, focused only on getting through the next show. Each one solved a problem sitting directly in front of them, and each solution quietly built the next stage for something none of them could have possibly imagined, let alone intended. That is the real shape of a butterfly effect. Not magic, not a straight line drawn on a chalkboard, a long, tangled, deeply human chain of people responding to their own narrow moment, unaware they were laying track toward a destination centuries away that would mean nothing to them and everything to you. So the next time you scroll past a subscription platform on your phone, without a second thought, remember where the idea of paying directly for access to a preserved, packaged, performed body actually began. Not in Silicon Valley, not in a pitch meeting, not in a venture capital office, in the sand, 4,000 years ago, with someone trying to make absolutely sure a body would last forever. It did, just not remotely in the way anyone back then intended.